Welcome to the County Conversations Podcast, brought to you by the Florida Association of Counties Institute for County Government with support from the University of Florida's IFAS. In this podcast, we dive deep into the diverse and dynamic world of Florida's counties with engaging interviews and thought-provoking conversations surrounding the challenges as well as successes of Florida's counties. Each episode brings you first-hand perspectives from county commissioners, government officials, community leaders, and subject matter experts who are shaping the future of our state. We explore a wide range of topics from economic development and public safety to environmental conservation and emerging technologies. Our aim here is to provide a platform for knowledge sharing, collaboration, and inspiration for county officials and residents alike. Whether you're a county commissioner, government professional, or simply interested in understanding the local government landscape, we hope this podcast provides valuable insights and practical takeaways on all things counties.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of County Conversations, where today we dive into the world of solar energy. Although solar power production has been around for some time, it's only recently that we've seen this technology really take off. Residential rooftop solar is emerging across our communities, but the real players in this field are the investor-owned utility companies that are making substantial investments in this important technology. This emerging trend was recently highlighted in Florida Trend magazine that detailed where some of these utility investments are being made and their associated costs. In fact, some of these investments are fairly staggering. According to the article, in 2022 and 2023, Florida Power & Light spent nearly $350 million to acquire more than 40,000 acres of land that can someday be used for solar energy production. While the company has more than 60 solar energy centers across the state, capable of generating enough energy to power 945,000 homes, the company plans to add 20,000 megawatts of solar generation in the next 10 years, according to the article. While solar energy is a renewable resource, clean and free of greenhouse gases with very low maintenance costs, like any development, there is the potential to disrupt local environmental communities. Recognizing this, companies like Florida Power & Light work closely with a broad range of stakeholders in its siting, design, and construction work when deploying solar. Stakeholders often include citizens, counties, state wildlife agencies, conservation organizations, universities, and other interested parties that can provide valuable knowledge of local ecological and environmental issues. Post-production, FPL specialists work with facility operations staff to ensure ongoing environmental stewardship are maintained during the power generation of the project. As an indicator of its commitment to the environment, FPL's work in this area, among other contributions, include preserving more than 4,000 acres of wetlands, placing 4,000 acres under conservation designation, and planting more than 290,000 native trees, shrubs, and wildflowers. So from clean energy to a commitment to the environment and local stakeholders, FPL is a leader in solar energy and one we can turn to understand where Florida is heading in this arena. To help us understand this development from the utility perspective, we are joined today by Brandon Stankwitz with Florida Power & Light. FPL is a FACT partner, and Mr. Stankwitz is Vice President of Development for FPL. Brandon, welcome to the podcast. And to put our conversation into context from the utility perspective, would you mind telling us a little bit about the corporate structure of FPL and what the solar footprint of your company looks like today in Florida?
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Eric, for the invite. It's great to be here, and I've been looking forward to the discussion as well. So hopefully we'll have a good one here. So FPL corporate structure. So Florida Power & Light is it's a utility here in Florida that operates under the jurisdiction of the Florida Public Service Commission. We serve about 12 million customers in 43 counties across the state, with service territory that runs from Miami in the south all the way up the coast, along with the pocket on the southwest part of the state, and then all the way over to Pensacola in the northwest part of Florida. Florida Power & Light is one of the two main subsidiaries of our parent company, which is called NextEra Energy Incorporated. The other major subsidiary is a company called NextEra Energy Resources, which operates outside the state of Florida in the other 49 states. Largest owner-operator of wind and solar in North America and one of the largest in the world. And their core set of customers is really to develop renewable assets, wind and solar, and sell them under some type of a contract structure, typically to utilities like Florida Power & Light, or other large commercial and industrial customers that might be out there looking to add renewable energy to their portfolio.
Fantastic. I know we want to talk about solar, but there are different forms of power generation that FPL maintains. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the keys to operating any utility successfully really is going to be to make sure that you have a diverse set of generating resources that you have out there that you're available to draw from. So Florida Power and Light's fleet is composed primarily of natural gas, a lot of which we've done a lot of great work in the last decade or so, modernizing to tear down the old units that burned a lot more fuel and required a lot more resources to operate, and modernizing those units to improve them and improve the efficiency and reduce the amount of fuel that they burn, which at the end of the day is great for FPL's customers. We also have our nuclear units in St. Lucie County and down at Turkey Point in Miami that serve as our base load. And then obviously we're here to talk about solar, but solar is the third leg of the stool, so to speak, and something that we've been doing a lot in the last few years to add to our generation mix.
All right, well, let's dive right into that. It's our understanding that FPL was the first company to build a universal solar project in Florida. Can you talk about the company's legacy work and how it's evolved over the past couple of years?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. Back in 2009, 2010, FPL was the first to put solar onto the grid here in Florida. We did that as part of a series of pilots that we worked through with our regulators in Tallahassee at the Florida Public Service Commission. And the intent of those pilots really was to get solar photovoltaics on the grid here in Florida, see how it integrated and how it operated on FPL system, and how it did in Florida's environment, which, you know, at the time in 2009, 2010, most of the solar that had been deployed in the United States was, you know, out west in the high desert of California, which is a little bit different, obviously, than the climatic conditions that we see down here in Florida. So really, by doing those pilot projects, it was to test the technology in the environment with the weather patterns and see how it did on FPL systems. So the two pilots that we built, we did one in DeSoto County. It was about 25 megawatts in size. And the second one that we did was what we call our Space Coast facility, located up at Kennedy Space Center. And obviously, those pilots worked out very well, and it led us to really start growing the solar fleet back in 2016. So we've been at it in a big way for about 8 years now.
Those pilots in DeSoto and the Space Coast, what did they indicate to the company that this is an investment that it needs to make?
Well, first off, they operated extremely well. In fact, both of them are still operating today, and they're operating successfully. And I think one of the most important things that it demonstrates, obviously, is that technology works, but also that it was very possible for these types of generating resources to be a progressively larger share of FPL's generation fleet. It was apparent right off the bat that by operating these things and operating them successfully, we'd be able to save our customers some money, because solar obviously doesn't require fuel to operate. And at the end of the day, that's a great thing for our customers. So, you know, piloting these things gave us all the tools that we needed. And from our perspective, then it was just a matter of time until the cost point got right, where it made sense and cost effective sense for us to add this on the grid for our customers.
So from the pilots, and I'm going to use sort of the nomenclature that I've read about, is solar energy centers. Can you describe what these centers consist of and what the benefits are for the customers in the community?
Yeah, so every solar energy center it's composed of actually a few components. The primary makeup of one of these things is going to be your solar module, your solar panel that sits on top of some type of a support structure, what we call a racking system. That racking system it's typically one of two types. It can be fixed, where it's basically anchored to the ground and it doesn't move, or it can be installed on what we call a single access tracker. So the tracker moves and it follows the sun from when it rises in the morning in the east, and it tracks the sun's path across the sky until it sets in the west. And by doing that, you can obviously capture a little bit more of the energy that's out there over the course of the day. So you got your solar modules, you have your racking system. One of the other main types of components of a solar energy center is what we call a power inverter. Get a little bit into the details here, but solar modules generate direct current electricity. The power that we use in our homes and businesses is alternating current. What the inverters do is it converts that electricity from direct current to alternating current, which makes it usable power basically. And then from there, we collect the energy that those inverters have changed to usable power at a collector substation. We transform it to the voltage that the local transmission system is operating on. And from there, we can connect it to the grid, and those electrons from the Solar Energy Center are going to flow downstream to our users. As far as benefits, we can go a couple of different directions there. There are a number of economic benefits, obviously, for the counties that we're working on siting these facilities in. Top of the list is typically going to be your ad valorem taxes. So each one of these solar energy centers that we build will generate hundreds of thousands of dollars in tax revenue for the counties that they're located in, which can then be used to invest in the schools, invest in public infrastructure, or really anything else that the county sees fit. Job creation is another one. Every one that we build usually requires about 200 different types of trades and labor to construct. We work with our construction partners, and they try to source that labor locally whenever possible and try to continue to inject, economic benefits into the local communities. And then certainly on the environmental benefits side, there's plenty of those as well, which I'd be happy to talk about if you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I would say emissions are a big one. Solar energy centers don't require any fuel to operate. So if you're not burning any fuel, you're not emitting anything into the atmosphere. Each one of our 74.5 megawatt solar energy centers generates enough power for about 15,000 typical FPL customers. And the emissions savings that we see from operating one of those things, if we were to not have it basically and run a natural gas unit in its place, is equivalent to saving about 14,000 cars worth of emissions every year. So the emissions upside is pretty significant. Another great environmental facet, I think, is we've developed some very strong partnerships with different environmental organizations across the state. One of those is with Autobahn. We've developed a program collaboratively with them that we call our solar stewardship program, where basically during the design of each one of these centers, we talk with the Autobahn. They take a look at where this thing is located in the environment, what types of species and habitat there might be on site, and they'll come to us with a list of different ideas that we could use to enhance different types of habitats or plant different types of wildflower species or grasses or anything else really that's possible out there to increase the environmental benefits and make these things as compatible as they possibly can in the environment in which they're located. So it's been a great partnership with Autobahn. I think it's been a really successful program, and it's a nice little wrinkle that we like to talk about whenever we have the opportunity to. We do try very, very hard to work on the front end with as many of the folks that are located around these things as we possibly can. That's neighboring landowners. That's the environmental organizations that I mentioned. It could be other civic organizations. It's the elected officials in the counties where we're working. It's county staffs, and it's really anybody else who might have a vested interest or a stake in this thing to do exactly what you're saying, right? It's to try to be mindful of the things that are important in those communities, to be mindful of what's on the minds of the elected officials, to try to incorporate those concerns or requests or what have you into the early stage design of this thing, so that we can tick as many of those boxes and come up with the facility that hopefully everybody can be proud of, that they like seeing out there as part of the community. So that's a really important part for us on the front end of this development process, for sure.
Brandon, can we go back to something you said earlier? And it is, when you're developing these solar energy centers, you said some of them can be put on a single axis tracker. That was the term you used. These actually will follow the sun from the morning to the afternoon. Is that correct?
Yeah, they do. Not all of them, right? For the first few years here in Florida, we built predominantly fixed, so the ones that don't track, and those are generally oriented south, where you're going to capture the best sun resource if you're not able to move it. But increasingly in the last couple of years, we've been working with the equipment manufacturers who build that tracker. And as we understand what's going on in the environment, we're able to get those single access trackers deployed basically everywhere in the state now. So with the exception of Miami-Dade County, which has the highest wind loading requirement in the state, we're building those tracking installations pretty much everywhere now.
Without getting too much far in the weeds, can you talk about once that power is captured and it goes through the inverter, as you said, and gets into the grid, is that energy localized? In other words, does it only serve the customers within those counties, or does it go into the major grid itself and gets dispersed through different parts of the state?
That's a good question. We believe it or not get that one all the time. So hopefully I can do a good job answering it for you. So when the energy is injected onto our Bolt power system, so those high voltage transmission lines that you see running all over the state, the best analogy that I can think of for you is to think about it as water in a pipe, right? All the different types of generators that FPL and frankly all the other utilities have around the state are all generating power. They're all putting it onto their local transmission systems, and those transmission systems are all more or less connected to each other in some way or another as well, which is why it's called a transmission grid. So there's this interconnectivity all around the state between all the different systems out there. So once you have all those electrons on the system or all that water in the pipe, the best way to think about it is that when somebody flips their light switch or has some other kind of load, basically when they open the spigot, the electrons or the water in that pipe are flowing to the nearest place where there's an opening for them to go. So the nearest load, basically. So when we do our planning and when we're planning how to use our generation, we're factoring in all of the different generation sources across the entire system. But from a physics perspective, while I can't track a single electron, I think it stands to reason and it's probable that when you're generating electricity and you have a large load that's fairly close to where you're generating it, there's a pretty good chance that that energy is going to be consumed where there's load close to where it's being made, if that makes sense.
It does. Well, I also noticed that, and I've got a cheat sheet because I went to the FPL website, that most of the solar energy centers are 74.5 megawatts, generally serving about 15,000 homes. But what I noticed, what was interesting was that the footprint in some of these centers are different and the number of photovoltaic solar panels vary, although the generation is supposed to be the 74.5. I'm just curious if you can talk about why the footprint is a little bit larger in some areas and smaller in others.
Yeah, great question. So when we start developing one of these sites, we've obviously gone out and we've looked at it and acquired a piece of property. Once that happens, we spend a lot of time and energy putting personnel onto the ground to study and to learn as much as we possibly can about that piece of property. So we'll have scientists in the field who go and look for and delineate any kind of wetland features or water bodies or things of that nature that might be out there. We'll take a look at different types of plant and animal habitat that might be of particular note or protected, whether it's state or federally. We'll look for cultural or historic resources that might require or warrant preservation. We'll take a look at soil conditions. We'll take a look at how the stormwater flows across the piece of property. We'll take a look at as many of those different facets as we possibly can. And one of the nice things about photovoltaic arrays is that it's very modular. You can adjust the way that you're building your design to try to avoid as many of those sensitive areas as we possibly can. And we've been very successful, I think, at avoiding the vast majority of those across that fleet of solar energy centers that we operate, which is why when you look at the map, all of them look a little bit different. That's because every single site that we're building on is itself a little bit different. And if we've done a good job studying the property and really understanding what's going on there, we can adjust the design of our facilities to try to absolutely minimize any types of impact that we might have on any kind of resource that we ought to be preserving. So that's the primary reason why each one of those sites looks a little bit different.
So it sounds like you have options and flexibility once you've selected a site. You can minimize the impacts to the environment while maximizing the amount of energy that you can draw from the sun. But I'm assuming, given the state's broad geographic diversity, there might be what I guess would be called sun variability. Are certain areas of the state more conducive than others for solar power generation?
It does. It's so the variability, as we call it, isn't as broad across Florida as it would be, say, comparing Florida to Arizona or Nevada or something like that. But there definitely is a difference in what we call our solar resource in Pensacola and what we would see down in Miami, whether it's primarily weather related, right? But variability is something that we account for. It's something that we model. And it's something that we try to account for in our design and in our forecasting when we're trying to determine how much energy to expect each one of those energy centers to produce. And again, I'll go back to one of the early talking points that I've got, right? Diversity in your generation sources is really important, not only in the type of generation that we have. And I mentioned we've got a lot of solar, we've got a lot of natural gas, and we've got a bit of nuclear in the mix. But with our solar energy centers, the geographic diversity that we now see across the portfolio that we've got is really important because, solar does have cloud cover, it does have local weather patterns. And by having, those solar energy centers spread out across as many of the counties as we possibly can in areas where we serve customers, you can mitigate the local impact of those local weather patterns. So on a portfolio effect for our solar fleet, by having them spread out across the state, the portfolio starts to look a lot smoother than it would otherwise be if you had a whole bunch of sites located next to each other and you had a weather pattern go through. So geographic diversity, not only in the generation types, but in the locations of the generation fleet with solar is obviously really important. And one of the other things that we're starting to take a lot closer look at is the use of battery storage to help with some of those localized weather patterns as well.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about that too. Several years ago on one of our county innovation tours, we were in Charlotte County and had the privilege of visiting Babcock Ranch. And a few representatives from FPL took us out to the solar field and I would just call it the demonstration center that they have out there. So we were able to get an elevated view of the field. But what they also were showing us, I think, were some battery storage facilities. I say facility, but large batteries that they were testing at the time to see if they could hold on to some of that energy. So can you talk about kind of the evolution of batteries? And I thought that would be something that's very easily done. You harvest energy from the sun, you put it in a battery, and it's good to go for whenever you need it. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So that installation that you saw at Babcock Ranch, if you recall what we talked about with the solar pilots back in 2009, 2010, the installation at Babcock was part of a battery pilot that we were pursuing in the 2017, 2018 timeframe. So Babcock Ranch, one of the other solar energy centers down the street in DeSoto County, a couple of others in the northern part of Florida, and a couple of smaller locations scattered about FPL's fleet were FPL's attempt to experiment and deploy a bunch of different configurations of battery energy storage, very similar to what we did with solar, right? Get it out there in the field, let our system operators experiment with it, see how it performs, see what the best way to integrate batteries on FPL's system was. And that's exactly what the pilot was. And I think we accomplished that. And, since 2017 or 2018, again, I think we've taken some pretty significant steps forward. We have a very large battery installation now that's operating in Manatee County. It's about 409 megawatts in size. At the time that it was built, it was one of the biggest in the country. It's since been surpassed by some other battery sites out in the western part of the United States. But you're right, battery storage is something that I see becoming a very increasingly important part of our generating fleet, especially as we have more solar on the system. In fact, we are right now. In fact, on Friday, we successfully got a handful of batteries approved up in Northwest Florida as part of really the first wave of new battery storage that we'll be constructing in 2025 and hopefully placing in service at the end of the year. But again, batteries, solar, natural gas, nuclear, it's all part of that diverse energy mix. And as battery technology, much like solar, has continued to improve, the technology's gotten better, the technology's gotten cheaper. And now that we see all those things coming together, battery is it's a cost-effective addition for our customers. Again, that's the recurring theme here. It's something that we always pay attention to. And we'll see, hopefully, a lot more battery being deployed on the system in the next few years.
Well, sticking with the improving technology theme, my sense is that solar panels that were developed 20 years ago generate less power, electricity than the ones today. And projecting that thought into the future, the solar panels that are going to be built 15, 20 years from now will generate more power than the ones today. And my guess would be if you've got improved technology to harvest more energy from the sun, then the amount of space that you would need is going to be smaller. So do you see the land area that's required for solar fields today actually shrinking going into the future? So the space that you might need is going to be much smaller.
Yeah, that is an astute observation, and I would agree with you. As an example, some of those original solar energy centers that we built back in 2016, 2017, you'd need about anywhere between 300,000 and 400,000 modules typically to kind of get to the design parameters that we wanted for that solar energy center, back in 2016, 2017. That same energy output today we can get using somewhere between 150,000 and 200,000 modules for exactly the reason that you said. The modules have gotten better. The materials inside them have gotten better and more efficient at converting solar energy into electricity. And on top of that, there are different types of modules now that also can do a little bit better job, right? And one type of technology, it's called a bifacial module. So it's exactly what it sounds like. You have that primary surface that's pointing up towards the sun where, the sunlight hits it, captures it, generates electricity. But the innovation there is that that type of module, that bifacial module, can also catch energy basically that's scattering off of the ground, either next to or underneath it, and generating just a little bit more energy from sunlight that's scattering and hitting the backside of that module as well. So again, better materials, better conversion efficiency in the module itself, but also some other types of technological innovations that allow you to get just a little bit more energy out of the same footprint as you were before. But I agree with you. If that trend continues, and I have no reason to believe that it won't, I think we'll be able to do the same amount with less and less land as this thing continues.
Brandon, what about resiliency? How do these solar panels, these solar fields, handle themselves during a major storm event, something like Hurricane Ian?
Yeah, I'm sure plenty of my colleagues around the building here are paying very close attention to that weather forecast. As you might imagine, a utility that serves as many customers as we do here in Florida, hurricane preparation, recovery, God forbid we have one, is top of mind. So, and that goes for the solar energy centers, just as you suspect. So, we take a look at the design requirements and the wind loading requirements that are in all the local Florida building code. That varies county by county and geography by geography. So it's definitely one of the things that our engineers are taking a look at when they're designing these things, and we're designing them to make sure that they're going to be able to withstand the weather conditions that we have in Florida, and that obviously includes hurricanes. So I'll give you an example. So Hurricane Ian back in 2022 came across the state of Florida, came through Fort Myers and basically moved across the state. In 2022 with Hurricane Ian, we had about 12 million solar modules that were impacted in one way or another in the path of that storm, Hurricane Ian. And the fleet did exactly what it was supposed to. The designs worked extremely well. So 12 million, we had 0.03% of the modules that were impacted by that storm suffer some kind of damage. And a lot of that damage was from wind-blown debris that struck the modules and caused some kind of a damage there. So I think a great testament to the work that our engineers did, the quality of the building materials that we had out there, and hopefully a good indicator of what we can expect to see for the rest of the fleet in the future if we suffer another storm impact. But you know, those facilities were back online in short order after the storm passed and after we were able to inspect and get everything cleared and back to operations. So I think that's a great success story for us.
Yeah, I know Babcock Ranch has
Yeah.
highlighted that a number of times, and I'm not even sure they lost power during Hurricane Ian, although they're inland, but I think that was one of the success stories
Yeah,
coming
no,
out of that.
you're right. I remember collecting some of the wind data from the Babcock Ranch solar facility out there, and you're right. Our good friend Mr. Kitson certainly likes to sing the praises, and to be fair, he's done a great job with that community and looking into the future and doing things like burying the distribution lines around that community and being connected in multiple locations to the Bolt transmission system. I think helps with all that resiliency. So you're right. Great success story there.
Brandon, at the beginning of this podcast, I mentioned that there's a lot of rooftop solar across the state. And so non-commercial, primarily residential solar panels on residential homes. Does FPL have any sort of program for its customers to take advantage of all the new solar technology that's out there?
We do. So one of the programs that we offer, it's called FPL Solar Together. And what that program is it's an opt-in program. So anybody who's interested is able to subscribe to this program basically for a fixed fee. And what you're doing is basically you're essentially buying a share of one of our universal scale solar energy centers that FPL is operating, and the energy that grouping of facilities produces creates a bill credit that the program participants then receive back on their monthly bill. And that credit is designed to escalate each year that a participant is enrolled in the program. So participant opts in, they pay a subscription fee, they get an escalating benefit stream in the form of those bill credits, which helps to offset the power that they're consuming elsewhere on their property. And the reason we really like the Solar Together program, it's a couple fold. Number one, the program participants can, once they're opted in, if they choose to move, they can take their program subscription with them and basically start it up again at the new address for their home or business as they see fit. And the other thing that's great is that FPL has a lot of customers who can't participate, in solar on their own, whether that's an apartment owner or a condominium owner, folks who aren't able to put solar on their rooftop for some reason or another. So Solar Together allows them to participate and capture some of the benefits from solar where they otherwise might not be able to. And obviously doing those sites at that scale really leverages FPL's ability to do that solar at the lowest possible cost.
Okay, let me ask you this. Someone gets a fixed fee subscription per month that they pay,
That's correct.
and then they get a credit on their account, and you said the credits go up over time?
That is also correct.
Well, who was the genius that thought of this? That's fantastic.
I was around when they designed that program, and there were a whole lot of people a lot smarter than me working the math and trying to figure that one out. So I agree with you. It's been a great program. I think it's been extremely well received by the customers out there. We had an initial phase of the program that sold out very quickly, which led us to offer a subsequent phase of the program, what we call our Solar Together extension, which for my team meant a whole lot more solar energy centers to go and permit and get constructed out there. So it's been an incredibly successful program for us.
Well, that's fantastic. So let's look beyond today. What does solar look like in our state with Florida Power and Light going forward?
Well, Florida it's one of the fastest growing states out there. There are thousands of people moving down here every month. And like I mentioned before, we have a very large service territory, and it is incumbent upon us to try to make sure we're planning for the future and to reliably and cost effectively meet the needs of every single customer that is in our service footprint. So what's ahead for solar right now? It is for the foreseeable future anyway, it continues to be the most cost-effective option for FPL to add generation to its fleet to make sure that we can safely and reliably serve those customers. So my team will be here trying to do our level best to develop those sites as effectively and as low impact and as collaboratively as we possibly can with our partners out there in all the counties that we're operating in to keep developing solar and keep doing it as long as it's cost effective for our customers. So we're very excited about all of that, and we'll be keeping our ear to the ground for any other kind of technological improvements that might be out there that allow us to do it just a little bit better and a little bit cheaper.
Well, Brandon, thank you. Thank you to FPL for everything that you do for our state, and thank you for the partnership with the Florida Association of Counties. Really appreciate your time, and this was a great conversation on solar, and I'm glad we're finally able to get you on.
Great talking with you, Eric. Great discussion. Thanks so much.
Thank you.